And so it is my pleasure tonight to introduce to you our good friend and colleague, Mike Cassidy, who's going to give us his perspective on maximizing your community resources for the future. Mike. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Clinton. Appreciate it very much. And Ross and Laura, I really appreciate the invitation to be here with you this evening. It's a great pleasure and an honor. And it's always wonderful when you reach underneath and you actually find your notes there. I want to begin, of course, by congratulating all of you, the newly elected county commissioners. And I very much admire the role that you're playing, what you've had to do to get to the point that you're at, what you will be doing over your next several years of service. I know that local governance is a very complex undertaking. The job won't be easy. I'm confident that all of you are up to it. And as you've heard from Clinton, we need organizations like ACCG to help guide you through this next 4 years and beyond, and to give you the training and just to give you the networking opportunities. I think it's wonderful that you're all here. It's a big commitment out of your time to come spend a couple of days here, but I think Ross and his team are going to make it very much worthwhile for you. I was thinking, I came over early enough to hear Kathy Cox speak this afternoon. I've known Kathy a long time, and I really admire and think the world of her, and always take some of the things that she says to heart. And Clinton just talking about her, it's a tough act to follow, I just have to say, so I'm not going to try. But she talked about one thing, and I want to just relate a real quick personal story to you, just to let you know that while I'm going to talk about some things that might seem a little bit esoteric as the evening goes on, I have a little bit of an understanding about what you all are up to. I got the itch a long time ago, over 20 years ago, to get involved and to seek public office. It wasn't anything as complicated as county commissioner. It was neighborhood president. And so clearly you understand why I didn't pursue anything after that. But I did run, and I was elected. And you know, we met, I guess, quarterly, and the neighborhood would come and all that. And our little neighborhood, nice little place over here in Atlanta, we were undergoing some changes and a lot of issues, and we were trying to work our way through it. And there was this one wonderful woman that would always come to the meetings and always sit on the front row and always take issue with just about everything that I said. And I would just have to, you know, grit my teeth and bite my tongue and do everything I could to just not lose control and figure somehow we will get through this. Well, our neighborhood is built around this very attractive little duck pond. And in the middle of the duck pond's the big storm drain that when it rains real hard, it overflows and the water rushes in there. And one evening we had just a belly gusher of a rainstorm. And I knew what was going on down at the duck pond. The water would be flowing down this drain. The phone rings about midnight. And it's this wonderful woman who hates me. And she's yelling and screaming. It's something about ducks and the drain. Well, I got her to calm down, and it turns out all of this water rushing over, you know, going down into the drain, a bunch of the ducks got washed over with it, and the rain was long over, but they're down in the bottom of this drain squawking and waking her up. And she says, "You got to do something. You got to do something." So this is going to be your life. I got my ladder. And I went down to the duck pond, and of course it's about 3 feet deep, and I wade out through the muck and the mud, and I stick the ladder down in there, and I go down and I get the ducks and I bring them up. Everything's great. Next morning she calls me up, and she couldn't be more thankful. And you know, the next couple of meetings it was a whole different deal. I couldn't have had a better friend, a more supportive person. I could have probably turned around and said, "I'm running for county commissioner," and she'd have been the first one, you know, out campaigning for me. So that service above self, as we say in Rotary, I'm sure spills over into your world, and it really is what it's all about. And it's those little acts that I think all of you will be remembered for. And again, I don't think you'd be where you are tonight if you didn't already have that inside. So anyway, when Ross asked me to come over here and talk with you, I was thinking about sort of intersection of interest, and Clinton told you just very briefly what we're about at the Georgia Research Alliance. You're all newly elected county commissioners. You've got the job of strengthening the form of government that's closest to our citizens. My organization, we're working to grow pioneering research at our universities around the state. Research that we think will lead to new discoveries, new companies, new jobs. Now, it's not a perfect overlap, but as Clinton says, we're all interested in economic development. So we've got that in common. We're both working to create a stronger economy and a better way of life for Georgians. Ross wanted me to speak with you about maximizing community resources for the future. Now, among the most valuable resources that we have in this state, really in any state, and that you have in your community are our colleges and our universities. They have been historically, and they will continue to be in the future. Just yesterday, I was with Laura at a symposium that was hosted by the University System of Georgia, looking at the role of our colleges and universities in driving new economic development opportunities for the state. Laura moderated one of the panels, did a beautiful job sort of making some connections between how our universities are working with rural economies all around the state. Now, since research is included in the name of my organization, Georgia Research Alliance, tonight I want to share with you just a little bit about what's happening inside a subset of our state's colleges and universities. I want to talk with you about our research universities, and there are just a few of them. I want to talk with you about them because, one, there's really fascinating things happening across our universities. Two, we don't think enough people know about what's happening in those universities. And three, we think the work that's happening in these universities will be among some of the biggest drivers of the future economy of our state. Universities have always been a major source of problem solving for our nation. When you look at what the world's universities have brought to us, the list is awe-inspiring. Think about the discoveries that universities have given us and how they impact your daily life. The spreadsheet, the internet, seatbelts, flu shots, rocket fuel, solar power, CAT scans, touchscreens, ultrasound, Gatorade, plexiglass, and pacemakers, just to name a few. Things that touch our everyday life, all with their origins in our great research universities all across this country. Closer to home, right here in Georgia, a top-selling medication for chronic dry eye called Restasis was invented right here on this campus at the University of Georgia. So were hybrid turf grasses that you see on golf courses and athletic fields everywhere around the world. And 9 out of 10 Americans being treated for HIV/AIDS take a drug called Emtreva as part of their daily regimen. Emtreva is the most prescribed AIDS medication in the entire world, and it was invented right on the campus of Emory University in Atlanta. So besides providing us with answers to our needs and solutions to our problems, research from America's universities has given our nation a tremendous competitive advantage in the global economy. The more we explore, the more we'll find, and the more we'll have to market to the rest of the world. Now here's an example of how that works. At GRA, we manage a program called Venture Lab. We use it to provide critical seed funding to discoveries and inventions that show promise in our universities. And we use it to do some matchmaking, connecting seasoned entrepreneurs with scientists and engineers in our universities. A few years back, we invested in a new technology that a Georgia Tech team was working on. The technology helped detect irregularities, quote unquote, irregularities in the communication between a computer and a remote source. The type of irregularities identifies are signs that someone else is in control of your computer. And this someone is usually more like several someones, typically a crime syndicate operating across the world, for example. And they're not using your laptop to send emails about Viagra. They've taken control of your computer to access other computers from which they'll steal information. The information is then sold on the black market. It's going on every day. It's costing industry and citizens billions of dollars. Millions of computers around the world are under the control of criminals without the owners even knowing about it. Typically, criminals don't seek in, you actually let them in. You click on a fake PDF file or a false link, and you've unlocked the door. The information they collect may not seem like a big deal, but it leads to massive defrauding of governments and corporations alike. The Georgia Tech team invented a technology that can detect this brand of command and control invasion. That technology eventually became a company called Damballa. And theirs is the only product on the market that defends against this kind of cybercrime. Many believe that Damballa will be a major success story for Georgia. They have something very unique, something all organizations all over the world need, and the need isn't going away. The CEO of Damballa says an entire town in Bulgaria has developed around crime syndicates that take over computers in the way I just described. Dombasle is a good example of how an idea at a university can develop and ultimately drive economic growth in our state. The company employs more than 175 people, just had another round of venture funding, about $15 million, mostly so they could add account people to keep up with the demand for their product. This is the kind of result that the GRA is after: ingenuity that ends up launching more companies and creating more jobs. The way we do that is to help universities build capacity in 3 areas. We help them recruit some of the brightest scientific minds to Georgia. We provide high-tech tools to the universities to help these scientists with their groundbreaking work. And then we shape and seed new companies around the inventions that have the greatest potential. And right now, there's a lot of really good potential out there. Exciting research is taking shape across our universities. Another example takes place just a few blocks from here in the lab of a fellow named Steve Stice. Steve is one of our 60-plus world-class scientists that we call GRA Eminent Scholars. We helped bring him to Georgia 15 years ago from the University of Massachusetts. At the time, he'd already produced the world's first cloned rabbit. Since coming to UGA, Steve has produced 10 other cloning firsts, including the first cloned cow. Now, you might ask, why is that important? Turns out that what you learn in cloning a cow learns you to learn how to insert genes that can introduce better disease resistance, better meat production, and even better taste. That's why the Georgia Cattlemen's Association worked with the Research Alliance to help bring Steve to the state. They recognized that they'd done about all they could do through natural breeding to improve feedstock, and asked our organization to work with them that could come in and introduce the tools of bioscience into breeding cattle. One of the projects that Steve's working on right now is a special gel that enables broken bones to heal much more quickly. It's a kind of a miracle putty. He injected this gel into the tiny broken bones in rats, and 2 weeks later, the rats are walking around, getting up on their hind legs, completely healed. Steve then tried the gel in sheep and found it generated bone mass in less than 4 weeks, which is a lot faster than Mother Nature works. So Steve wants to continue testing this fracture putty, as he calls it. This would be a remarkable invention if the future testing goes well. One intended purpose is for U.S. soldiers who suffer complex bone fractures in battle. Another project that Steve's working on could have a big impact on the poultry industry, which of course here in Georgia is a tremendous impact. A year ago, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invested more than $1 million in Steve's lab. It involves a new way to breed chickens so they can resist a deadly virus called Newcastle. What makes Newcastle so threatening is that poultry farmers often can't spot it until it's too late. 40 years ago, an outbreak of Newcastle in California required the state to kill 12 million chickens to keep the disease from spreading. And in sub-Saharan Africa recently, Newcastle wiped out entire populations of chickens, which of course in that part of the world, they're the only source of meat and a primary source of collateral. Steve's research will potentially lead to the ability to breed chickens that are genetically resistant to Newcastle. And this is work that's in progress right now, right here on this campus. And an interesting side story, this summer Steve got word that a high-level person from the Gates Foundation wanted to be briefed on the research. It wasn't possible for this foundation official to travel to Athens, so Steve and 3 of his colleagues came over to Atlanta. Steve's team arrived at the Intercontinental Hotel in Buckhead in their white UGA van and walked through the hotel lobby with microscopes, chicken eggs, and other equipment in hand. It was quite a sight. The person they met with was Bill Gates himself. And Steve and his colleagues gave a live demonstration to Bill of how they engineer the chicken egg. Of course, Bill followed the presentation very, very closely. He's a very intuitive guy, asked a lot of questions, was very impressed, and went away very, very pleased with the foundation's investment. Now, another really impressive scientist that's a little bit newer on the scene is a fellow named Ami Klin. Ami's one of the world's leading experts in autism, and we helped recruit Ami and his research team to Georgia from Yale University, where he had been for about the past 15 years. Now, how many of you know a child that has some form of autism? In Georgia, 1 in 84 kids born today is on what they call the spectrum of autism. 1 in 84. And that number has climbed steadily over the last decade. We don't know why that is, but we do know that the earlier that we can start helping these kids, the better they will develop. But as Ami Klin, our GRA eminent scholar at Children's, points out, you typically don't start to see signs of autism until a child's about 18 months old. So Ami's developed a new eye tracking method to measure how infants, as early as 6 months old, look at other people, especially their moms. They're actually building these eye tracking devices at the Marcus Autism Center, which Ami heads, in a very, very sophisticated machine shop that GRA built for him. The goal is to install this technology right in a pediatrician's office. While Ami's work is really groundbreaking, there's much more to come. A few months ago, the National Institutes of Health awarded a $9 million grant to Ami to help him expand his research at the Marcus Center. One of the projects in that grant is this eye tracking technology so that they can read and analyze how infants look at people at an age as early as 4 weeks old, a very big leap from the current age. Georgia, of course, has something very, very special in the Marcus Autism Center. It's the largest operation of its kind in the country. It serves 5,500 kids with autism each year, most of them coming from Georgia. This new grant elevates the center's profile. In fact, they're now one of just 3 in the nation designated by the National Institutes of Health as an autism center of excellence, a very, very high distinction. So you know a little bit now about GRA's investments. You know a little bit about the startup company that's stopping a complex breed of cybercrime, the scientist who's inventing putty that speeds the healing of a bone, a technique for breeding chickens that can resist deadly disease, and the scientist who's working on breakthroughs in the early detection and treatment of autism. If we had more time this evening, I'd tell you even more about things happening here on the UGA campus, about our scientist, Scott Jackson, who we recruited just last year, who by next spring will have completed the entire mapping of the genome for the peanut. Of course, his goal is to figure out why are peanuts allergenic, and is there a way to remove that from them based on the genetics. I could tell you about a fellow named Rafi Ahmed over at Emory University, who may have found a game changer in developing a single vaccine that can fight off all forms of flu. Such a vaccine would be the holy grail discovery, because right now scientists have to best guess which flu strain is most likely to be prevalent each year, and then develop a vaccine to fight just that strain. Now, just today we got news that the strain that's circulating this year is fairly virulent. It reacts very, very well, or responds very, very well to the vaccine that was developed for this year. Let me just ask, who's gotten their flu shot? My goodness. Well, let me encourage you, please, to go home and get your flu shot. They do work. But I could also tell you about another scientist, Andrew Meller, who's performing really interesting research into an enzyme that can turn off the body's immune response. His latest finding, the enzyme he's working with can reduce flare-ups from rheumatoid arthritis, kind of like pouring water on a fire. That's right. So many smart people in Georgia's universities working on promising inventions and discoveries right now. Their research has the potential to benefit everyone in this room. And we have to continue bringing scientists like these to Georgia because they have the power to create chain reactions that will grow the economy. Let me use an example from history just for a minute that might help put a finer point on this. Think about Albert Einstein. You've all read about him in your history books, or some of you may have been around. But now I'm thinking of Ross. When Albert Einstein left Germany in 1933 and he moved to the U.S., to a little town called Princeton, New Jersey, immediately Princeton, New Jersey became the world's leading center for small particle physics. Sounds kind of heady. But all of the best students that were studying in a very important new field, they all wanted to come be by the master in Princeton. All of the best young faculty all wanted to be by the master in Princeton. So they all congregated in that little town of Princeton, New Jersey. And over time, that whole region surrounding Princeton, New Jersey became a hotbed of innovation and discovery. Bell Labs grew up there because of the presence of so many brilliant scientists and engineers. The transistor was invented there. So was the laser. So were fiber optic cables. At one point, more than 100,000 people worked in the telecommunications industry in the Princeton area. This is economic development driven by scientific advance, and that's what we're all about. Now, this is a historic example. We don't, of course, have a household name among us yet like Einstein, but I have been able to talk with you, I think, about some of the recruits that we've made and the kinds of trajectories that they're on. A minute ago, I mentioned Rafi Ahmed, who's working on this single vaccine for flu. He was a superstar recruit of ours from UCLA about 16 years ago. It was around Rafi that the Emory Vaccine Center was built. That center put Georgia on the map in vaccine research. That's why I'm so passionate about you all going home and getting your flu shot. We invest a lot in this area of science. But today, that center, the Emory Vaccine Center, encompasses over 280 associated researchers and faculty and staff that work there with Rafi. And they conduct, get this, more than $80 million every year in research, most of it awarded very competitively by the federal government. It's a big enterprise. One discovery that's already emerged from that center is a promising vaccine against HIV and AIDS. That discovery led to the launch of a new company called GeoVax. You've probably not heard of GeoVax, but they've been testing their vaccine for more than a decade. And a year from now is a really big test coming up. 2,000 high-risk individuals. So a lot of people are watching GeoVax. In fact, last month, a leading investment research firm wrote this: GeoVax is a leading candidate to develop the first viable HIV vaccine. Its early findings look promising, and it's the only preventive vaccine candidate proceeding into efficacy trials. That means it looks good. One scientist leads to one major new research enterprise, which leads to a company that could change history. So what's it take to lure that one scientist to Georgia? Having participated in dozens of these kinds of recruitment efforts, most of which worked out, and a few that didn't, I can tell you that three things matter. First is climate. Georgia has the benefit of 4 seasons, especially our mild winters, which we're experiencing this week, and that's really good. But I'm talking about the other kind of climate, the general atmosphere for conducting scientific research. Top scientists want to be where there's critical mass and activity of other scientists. The stature of a state or a region within a state is important. Success attracts success. As Bill Gates once said, there's no example of a high-performing regional economy that doesn't have at least one major university in its midst. A year ago, we recruited an expert in nanotechnology to Georgia Tech. He's one of the world's most cited scientists in his field. He's now working with us to recruit 2 additional eminent scholars, colleagues of his from other universities. Smart people want to be around smart people. So the second thing that's important in bringing these folks is commitment. The scientist has to know that the state is all in for helping him or her conduct pioneering research. For Georgia, GRA plays a key role here. For each eminent scholar, we provide funding to establish endowed chairs at the university. Those universities have to match those funds 1 for 1. But we also have to invest in state-of-the-art technology, which federal grants typically won't fund. An example, a microscope that we funded for one university last year is one of just 2 such instruments in the United States. And then finally, there's community. And this brings us back to your role in part. Scientists want to know that Georgia's a great place to live. They care about good schools. They want outdoor activities, cultural amenities, and good places to eat and shop. They want things to do. They need to be able to envision life, not just for themselves, but for their families and for the teams of research assistants they typically bring with them. Climate, commitment, community. And I could add one more factor, and that's a little bit of good luck. And another quick story, we recruited a fella about 2 years ago from State University of New York up in Rochester. He's a specialist in immunology, and he came down to Georgia State University. Well, within weeks, one of our other schools approached us about recruiting a chap also from State University of New York, Rochester. So we went back to our friend that we'd just brought to Georgia State and asked if they knew each other. He said, yeah, in fact, our kids play together all the time. Well, darn if it wasn't the one kid convincing the other kid to convince mom and dad they need to be in Georgia. And so luck plays a piece of this. And we're glad to have a little bit of help like that because it's really tough work bringing these great minds to Georgia. They're usually very happy where they are. And more we're finding that these enterprising scholars want to see their efforts put to work, solving problems out in the world. They're scholars that are driven to translate their science into new companies. And that's important for two reasons. The first is that such companies, as I've explained, ultimately deliver what Georgia needs most in the future: high-value jobs. The prosperity of our state rests not only on the question of how many jobs, but what kind of jobs. Aside from direct job creation, there's another reason that GRA focuses on bringing entrepreneurial scientists to Georgia, and that's reputation. Earlier I said that scientists want to be at the center of activity. The same is true of businesses. The kinds of companies that create high-value jobs want access to an educated workforce, partnerships with good universities, and connections to others like them in their industry. So by fostering more high-tech startups, we're continuing to contribute to the creation in this context. We're positioning Georgia as more than a great place to live. It's a great place to prosper. We think this strategy that we're using helps us to reach the goal that Governor Deal has set for the state, to be the #1 place in the country to do business. I can't say enough about how important this is. Other states are out there trying to do the same thing. Georgia has to be in this game. We have to be strategic about where we place our investment. We have to shore up some areas where we're lacking, like K-12 education. We have to tell our story in a compelling and in a relevant way to let people know what's really happening here. And just to go off script a little bit, another thing that we've got to do is we've got to get back in the business of making things. And that touches every county in this state. We won't be competitive unless we grow our manufacturing economy. I mention this because recent economic development news on this front is especially encouraging in Georgia. The new Baxter International biopharmaceutical manufacturing facility near Covington will employ 1,500 people with a total investment that will exceed $1 billion. Caterpillar announced a new manufacturing facility near Athens with an investment of $200 million. They're reshoring jobs to the U.S. Mitsubishi Power Systems is adding 500 jobs and an investment of over $325 million in Chatham County. Key is expanding their operations in West Georgia. These are just a few examples, but they're shaping a larger story. Georgia's working to create jobs that will matter in the future. So imagine Georgia 20 years from now. As newly elected county commissioners, each of you is poised to make major contributions in shaping Georgia's future economy. What do you see in the future? We envision a place with a strong and a modern economy, a place with universities that have an even greater reputation than they do today, a place of vibrant communities where people are connected. All of this an extension, not a reinvention, of today's Georgia. I wish you well in your work, in your communities, and all that you're going to be doing, all of the work that you do to make and help Georgia become a better place. I want to thank you for your service to our state. Thank you for your attention this evening. I know I'm the only thing in between you and whatever comes after this. And let me wish you all the happiest and safest of holidays. Thanks very much.